Morning, guys. Welcome back to another episode of Mike's MMA Picks Fight Morning Quick Card Breakdown Show, brought to you by BetDSI, as well as MMA Oddsbreaker. We're heading to New Zealand, UFC Auckland, 12 fights, 6 of them expected to end inside the distance. Incredible main event between Paul Felder and Dan Hooker. Let's get things kicked off. In the women's 125-pound division, unfortunately, we do have to look at this fight because it is going to be DraftKings relevant. We have Shayna Dobson taking on Priscilla Cachoeira. Cachoeira, 7,600 underdog, plus 170 underdog, 7,600 in DraftKings. 8-3 professional record, known as the Zombie. Has fought the likes of Valentina Shevchenko. Was slaughtered by the likes of Valentina Shevchenko. Molly McCann put a whooping on her. Taking on Shayna Dobson, who has been fighting out of Colorado, 8,600 in DraftKings, minus 200 favorite. To me, that's a extremely wide line in this spot. You look at Dobson's record, she has a 4-inch reach advantage, losses to Lauren Mueller and others. The natural athlete goes to Dobson. The technical striking goes to Dobson. The heart, the zombie-esque qualities. The marching forward goes to Cachoeira. The ground game advantage will go to Cachoeira. This fight, toss-up to me. I see Cachoeira winning a controversial decision. Initially, I was leaning Dobson, but there are so many holes in each of these fighters' games. It's really tough to watch. What a hell of a way to open up a card, right? Ugh. All right. Next up, we've got women's 115-pound fighters. We've got Loma Lookboonmee taking on Angela Hill. Angela Hill has fought who's who at 115 pounds. Most recently disposed of Hannah Cyphers in spectacular fashion. 8,900 for Angela Hill. We know she's a high-volume striker. Minus 183 favorite at BetDSI. Lookboonmee, 7,300 plus 158 underdog. Lookboonmee, what stands out, 4-1. Mixed martial arts record despite having over 200 Muay Thai fights under her belt. She was submitted by armbar in 2018. She hasn't fought stiff competition yet. She's the much smaller fighter, less of a reach. I'm interested to see what happens when both of these fighters lock horns in the clinch. We know that Lookboonmee has the much more polished game. We know Angela Hill is flying to the other side of the planet Earth for this fight on short notice. and she's coming in with a lot of momentum. I think the experience of Angela Hill, despite being 11-7 professionally, you look at it, she's fought the who's who. She's been in there with, wow, some really stiff competition, and actually I thought put up a heck of a fight against Yan. This fight, though, the volume of Angela Hill at distance, I think, is going to be a difference maker, especially when it hits the scorecards, which I suspect it will. The fight is expected to go to a decision at minus 280. See a lot of people on Lookboonmee. I understand where they're coming from as far as Lookboonmee being the more technical striker, having a full camp under her belt. Angela Hill kind of just going camp after camp after camp. She hasn't been able to have an entire full camp under her belt for specific fighters, but give me Angela Hill to win a decision in this spot. Next up, men's 125-pound division. This has been my wheelhouse over the past few years. We have Tyson Nam, 36 years of age now, 6,900 plus 215 underdog. We know he packs massive power, taking on Kai Kara-France, who is coming in at a expensive price tag of 9,300 in DraftKings as a minus 255 favorite. Kai Kara-France, 26 years old, but you look at both of these guys, they both have, France has 28 professional fights under his record, and Nam has 29 fights under their record. Both have a lot of losses as well. Nam, 10 losses, and France has 8 losses on his record. France has been TKO'd in the past, so he is, I know he's been on a run for the past few years, but he can be stopped, and he isn't the biggest 125er out there. In fact, I honestly think this guy could fight at 115 pounds if there was a division. Hard-fought battle against Brandon Moreno last time out. I was on Moreno in that spot. Moreno was landing the heavier punches, bloodied France up in that fight, and really put it on him. But France didn't leave the fight and didn't turn his back on Moreno like we've seen inferior fighters do when they're put in bad spots. This kid will fight till the end. Nam, surprising for a guy who has so many knockouts on his record. He also has gone to decision and lost many decisions. Was listening to an interview with John over at Kumite TV, and he admitted that he got outpointed by Sergio Pettis last time out, and that he's been fighting the same way since he was 5 years old. In the interview, he said he's going to switch things up. I'm curious, this guy's going to be turning 37 years old soon. How is he going to switch things up in one camp for a tough opponent in Kai Kara-France? Long story short, if Kai Kara-France stays conscious throughout this bout, I have him winning the fight here. So give me Kai Kara-France to win a unanimous decision victory. This fight is expected to go to a decision at minus 185, though. And as far as DraftKings goes, I like playing the flyweights, the men flyweights, because they very, very active, especially if there are scrambles. And France does have the better ground game here. We know Nam has Ricky Simone helping him out, but just because you have a great training partner doesn't mean you acquire those skills. Next up, we've got Callan Potter taking on Kenan Song at 170 pounds. Callan Potter stole the show in Melbourne last year. Looked a little bit more durable heading up a weight class to 170 pounds. Callan Potter, 7,200 in DraftKings, plus 180 at the betting window. 35 years of age. Was a god on the regional scene out there. And got his chance. Was brutally knocked out by Jalen Turner, who we'll talk about in a couple of fights, but had that big win over Patolo. Kenan Song, 9,000 in DraftKings minus 210 at the betting window. Chinese fighter, 15-5 record. Fought Derek Krantz last time out and looked pretty good in that spot. A lot of people were on Derek Krantz there. This is his 5th UFC fight, and he has a winning record in the UFC, although Kenan Song hasn't fought the stiffest competition. Kenan Song, more precise striker, more technical on the feet, younger, faster, has more power. Potter has the better ground game, has more heart, better cardio, and he'll have a crowd that I suspect will be behind him in this spot. I think last time out we saw Potter get his moment in the spotlight, but this time out, Kenan Song is going to win this fight, in my eyes, by a late stoppage TKO. Potter was eating shots the whole fight against Patolo, but he's got a heck of a chin on him. Next up, we head to the men's 170-pound division, welterweights. We've got Emil Meek, the Norwegian fighter, 7,100 plus 195 at the betting window, taking on Jake Matthews, Australian fighter, 9,100 minus 230. Last time out, we saw Jake Matthews fight Rostam Akman and fought a relatively conservative game plan, didn't let his hands go in that fight, and he had opportunities to showcase his skills in front of his home crowd, and he won the fight, but it wasn't spectacular, and Jake Matthews has let us down in the past in a number of spots. You look at the Anthony Rocco Martin fight, and he was toasting Martin earlier in the bout, and then got caught in a choke. There have been other spots where he's let us down, and 15-4 record. I kind of wish that he made the move over to a gym like City Kickboxing. Still a tremendous amount of talent, only 25 years old. Emil Meek is a dynamic striker, doesn't have a great wrestling game, but you look who he's been facing recently: Kamaru Usman, Fabinski, even Jordan Mein, vets in the sport who can grapple. And Meek, we saw him turn the tide on Jordan Mein, who, by the way, we haven't seen Jordan Mein in quite some time. It'd be nice to get him back in there. I'd like to see Mein rematch Rory McDonald. So Emil Meek, let's get back to this fight. Emil Meek, he had that win over Paul Harris a long time ago in Venator, and he's got some solid striking. We know he can go 3 rounds. It's a tough fight. It's a very close fight in my eyes, and I'm a little shocked by the wide line for Matthews here at minus 230. I am going to pick him to win, but I think the fight's going to be closer than we expect in this spot. I think the striking at range and the takedowns are going to be there for Matthews, but Meek's dangerous, especially when fighters close distance on him. Give me Jake Matthews to win a decision. Next up, we've got the Tarantula, Jalen Turner, taking on Joshua Culibao. Culibao, Australian fighter, comes from the Moctarian crew, 7,400 in DraftKings, plus 185 underdog. Haven't seen much jiu-jitsu out of him. 8-0 record, so we have an undefeated fighter on our hands. But this is a very low-level fight. This fight's taking place at 155 pounds. You look at the weigh-ins, and Jalen Turner is huge compared to Culibao. Turner's coming in 8,800 minus 220. Turner still only 24 years of age, believe it or not. Culibao 25 years of age. So these fighters are relatively close in age, but you look at Turner's been knocked out a number of times in his career, both at a professional level and at the amateur level. Brutal knockouts. He's been able to deliver some brutal knockouts as well. We saw Turner fight Matt Frevola. Matt Frevola, the stock is, the arrow's pointing up for Matt Frevola, by the way. Love the way that guy fights. In fact, somebody recently on Twitter posted Dvalishvili and Frevola scrambling in some of their practices. If you have a chance, take a look at that. So Jalen Turner couldn't hang with Frevola in the grappling game. Culibao isn't going to bring that in this fight. I think these guys are going to come out and bang. And Turner, a southpaw fighter who shows great patience in the pocket, but can get teed off on, and that's a concern of mine. DraftKings, I believe you are going to want a piece of this fight. I do have Turner winning this fight inside the distance, but it's a dangerous spot when you're banking on low-level prospects. For DraftKings, Turner is going to be my play, but I have concerns rostering against an undefeated fighter who we haven't seen much from. And one of my mottos is you can't trust what you haven't seen. So be careful if you're wagering on that fight. But I do expect this fight to end inside the distance. Now, we head to the men's 145-pound division, where we have Kevin Aguilar taking on Zubaira Tukhugov. Tukhugov, 18-4-1 record. Been around the block in the UFC. Came back from a big-time layoff. 8,100 in DraftKings for Tukhugov. Also 8,100 on the other side of the board for Mr. Aguilar. Aguilar minus 123 at BetDSI. The odds are widening a bit here. We saw Aguilar win a fight over Enrique Barzola, win over Rick Glenn. Both of those fighters, very tough, grimy fighters who have decent wrestling. Well, guess what? Tukhugov does have great wrestling, but he doesn't seem to do much with or beyond that. In his last fight out, we saw him hanging on for dear life. And prior to that, we saw a close fight against Renato Moicano. And prior to that, he fought Felipe Nover. This fight is expected to go to a decision. I suspect it will. Aguilar, I believe, is he's going to spend most of the first round on his back and possibly some of the second round on his back, but I'm predicting him to turn the tide late in the fight, bloody Tukhugov up, and win a decision in this spot. Aguilar has a 5-inch reach advantage in this spot, and he's going to need space to get these punches off. As far as DraftKings goes, this is a dangerous fight. I know you've got fighters at that middle tier, 8,100. I don't think this fight's going to score very high in DraftKings because these guys are going to spend a lot of time in the clinch and on the ground. But give me Aguilar to win a close decision in this spot. Next up, we've got Brad Riddell taking on Magomed Mustafaev. Mustafaev, 8,400 in DraftKings, minus 140 at the betting window. 31 years of age. This is another Russian fighter who has spent a lot of time on the shelf, bit of an enigma. We've heard about Brad Riddell for a long time. He is the striking coach at City Kickboxing. Volkanovski's striking coach. A pretty amazing striker. Has a kickboxing background. Only 28 years of age. 7,800 in DraftKings, plus 120 underdog. I think we're going to see very high ownership here for Riddell. We saw Brad Riddell take on Mr. Malarkey in his UFC debut. I was impressed with Riddell's heart, and he had a fighter who reminded me of Rick Glenn, who just marched forward and was tough as nails and tough to put out of there. And one of Mike Tyson's favorite quotes I heard him say recently when he was breaking down the Tyson Fury Deontay Wilder fight, and he said it's tough to beat somebody who doesn't want to quit. And Malarkey was one of those fighters who was just eating strikes and marching forward. But he did have some success in that fight. Malarkey did, and put Riddell in some tough spots. And to me, Riddell has a lot of holes in his game, and he's not a finished product as far as mixed martial arts go. He may be a great kickboxer, but I have a few concerns here. He's very stiff on the feet, and his body type, I know he lost some muscle purposefully headed into this fight, and I can see the problems he was having out there. Energy conservation issues, that's a concern I have for him. Also, you look at the other side of the fight. Mustafaev, you talk about energy conservation issues. They both have them. Mustafaev will throw the kitchen sink and some at his opponents early. Was able to knock Fiziev out with a tremendous spinning kick. Even Kevin Lee, it's amazing how much Kevin Lee, his stock has dropped, and how much his confidence has faltered since that fight. If you go back and watch that Mustafaev Kevin Lee fight, but Mustafaev was having significant success earlier in that bout. Both of these guys have the same reach. For me, Mustafaev is the more complete fighter. He has the wrestling if it needs to go there. He is the more powerful striker, and I just think he's gonna catch Riddell, especially if this fight ends up in the latter rounds. Riddell is expecting to fight a technical battle, and he thinks he's going to be the smarter fighter, but Mustafaev is going to put him in spots where he's going to be forced to respond instantly, and I feel like, I know that the line's very close here, but I'll be picking Mustafaev to win this fight inside the distance. This fight is not expected to go to a decision at minus 175. Riddell may have his moments in this fight and may look like he's picking Mustafaev apart at times, but just when you start to get settled, Mustafaev comes charging at you with a barrage of strikes, and I think that's what's going to happen here. Next up, we've got women's 115-pound fighters. We've got Karolina Kowalkiewicz taking on Xiaonan Yan. 9,200. Did a lot of homework on this fight. Minus 285 at the betting window for Xiaonan Yan. 11-1 fighter. Chinese fighter. Fought Angela Hill last time out. Also had a win over Kondo, win over Pereira. Incredible to watch how tight her striking is. How she's willing to stand her ground in the pocket, and she's taking on a Karolina Kowalkiewicz who has a 12-5 mixed martial arts record, has recent losses to Alexa Grasso, Michelle Waterson, Jessica Andrade, has a win over Felice Herrig, although Felice Herrig had her moments in that spot and was catching Kowalkiewicz there. Kowalkiewicz, $7,000 in DraftKings plus 245 underdog. Xiaonan at 9,200. This fight is expected to go to a decision at minus 400, but I watch how Kowalkiewicz has her delivery on her strikes and her lack of head movement, and the first round is going to tell us a lot in this fight. This division, this weight class, we've seen some fighters come out flat, but Xiaonan, I have yet to see a flat performance from her. She's shown an educated ground game if the fight has ended up there at times. Even Kaylin Curran had some success taking Yan down, but holding her there is another issue. The wave of Chinese fighters coming in, this is a different breed, and I see many similarities in Weili Zhang that I do in Xiaonan Yan. This fight, though, one concern I have for Xiaonan Yan is in the clinch. We know that Karolina Kowalkiewicz does possess a solid clinch game, and she can be ferocious at times. So that's my one concern for Yan in this fight. The line has widened significantly. At one point, this line got down to minus 195. We hit that, and minus 215. Now it's up to minus 285. Yan has cardio to go all 3 rounds. It would not surprise me if this fight does end inside the distance. I'm actually going to go out on a limb here and predict Xiaonan Yan to win this fight late by TKO stoppage late. Take a look at those odds. I believe they're sitting around plus 500 or so, but safer play should be Xiaonan Yan to win this fight. Let's see if those straight odds drop. Right now, minus 285. Next up, we have Marcos Rogerio de Lima taking on Ben Sosoli. Marcos Rogerio de Lima, 8,500. I don't think he's deserving of that price tag in DraftKings. 7,700 for Ben Sosoli. Plus 125 at the betting window for Sosoli. Minus 145 for de Lima. Sosoli, tough fighter, head coach Daniel Kelly, who we know has coached a number of Australian fighters. In fact, the next fight, we have another fighter he's coaching. He's hung in there in his recent fights. We're talking about Sosoli here. Greg Hardy, a lot of people thought that fight was going to end inside the distance. It ended up Sosoli had a decent showing in that spot, would not go away. Marcos Rogerio de Lima, I was at his fight against Adam back at UFC, I believe 230. This is De Lima's 10th fight in the UFC, believe it or not, and he has been choked. He's been choked and submitted 4 times out of those 10 appearances. Very dangerous fight to play if you're playing this on DraftKings, though. The fight's supposed to end inside the distance at minus 180. De Lima has the better wrestling. He's got leg kicks. We saw him trying to tee off on Stefan Struve. Looked good in that first round, but then fell off. And fell off late in the fight. I suspect that may happen again. Though Sosoli looks so raw and green. When you watch his tape, he's tough as nails, and that may be enough to get a win here, but I have to go with the more skilled fighter. De Lima only has a 1-inch reach advantage. 34 years of age. He moved up to heavyweight a few fights ago. Give you De Lima to win this fight. Though I think you're playing with fire here if you're wagering on this fight. Next up, we've got a very closely lined fight. Odds might flip here. We've got Jimmy Crute taking on Riddell-Mustafaev. Oleksiejczuk, 24 years of age, 8,200, minus 123. Lord Michael, he's known as, lost to OSP last time out. We picked Lord Michael to win that previous bout. It was a matter of Michael emptying his tank early. OSP was getting shelled upon and just would not go away. Jimmy Crute, $8,000 in DraftKings plus 103. Underdog, 23 years of age. This fight is a battle of prospects. We've got a crossroads here. The crowd should be roaring when both of these fighters enter the octagon as the co-main of the evening. This fight's expected to not go the distance at minus 185. Jimmy Crute has a much better ground game. He's a much bigger fighter. He fights under Dan Kelly. Almost got Misha Serkinov out of there last time out, but unfortunately, almost only counts in horseshoes and hand grenades, not when it comes to picking mixed martial arts fights and winning mixed martial arts fights. 14-3 record for Lord Michael. Michael has the much better hands, more fleet of foot. I do think in this spot, if this stays on the feet, Michael should piece Crute up. Problem, though, is if this fight hits the ground, Crute has a very heavy top game, and he has submissions. And what I liked about Crute is that he will go for position over submission. And you don't see many fighters do that these days. They'll try to lock up a submission and then get swept. I don't think we're going to see Oleksiejczuk sweeping Crute in a matchup of this nature. 10-1 record for Crute. Originally, I was when I was first breaking down this fight, I had Michael winning. But the more I looked into it, the ground game for Crute, he has very heavy hands. Those hands are slow. And I like seeing Dan Kelly in his corner. I would love to see Oleksiejczuk move down to middleweight. I think he'd have a lot more success there, even though he has a 14-3 record. I think he's doing himself a disservice fighting at 205 pounds. Give me Jimmy Crute to win this fight inside the distance late. be aware Lord Michael has a 2-inch reach advantage in this spot. This is a toss-up fight, though. I would not be wagering on either side of this bout. I do think it won't go the distance, though. Main event of the evening. We have Paul Felder taking on Dan Hooker. This is what the UFC and mixed martial arts is all about. This is one of the better main events of the year. I think we'll see 7,500 in DraftKings for Paul Felder, 8,700 for Dan Hooker. This may be one of those fights where you get back to stacking main events. Both of these guys tough as nails. Hooker coming in with a 5-inch reach advantage, 8,700 in DraftKings for Dan Hooker, minus 155 at the betting window, plus 135 for Paul Felder. Again, only 7,500 for Paul Felder here. There's a big reach advantage for Hooker. He's 6-1 now at 155 pounds in the UFC. The knockout win of James Vick, impressive, though he was those were the sloppy seconds of Paul Felder, and we saw what Justin Gaethje did to Vick. Edson Barbosa. That when I was breaking down this fight, I was initially leaning Dan Hooker. He's got all the momentum. He's fighting at home. He's got the reach. He has the ground game. But one thing he doesn't have is the durability of a fighter of Paul Felder. Somebody who's been in there with Mike Perry. You watch that Mike Perry fight back. He took that fight on short notice. Granted, Mike Perry isn't the caliber of fighter of Dan Hooker, and they're different weight classes, but the way Felder came into that fight, he would not go away. He was on target. He isn't the quickest fighter. He is when he does spinning techniques. He's very quick when he does spinning techniques, but he will march forward. Has great Muay Thai. Has great kickboxing. The calf kicks, I believe, are going to be an issue, but the thing for me with Hooker is his durability. I think is going to come into play the longer this fight goes. He may win the first couple of rounds, so this may be a live wagering opportunity out there. Dan Hooker. One thing I noticed is I'm not going to say he's brittle, but he doesn't take damage well the longer the fight goes. This is such a closely lined fight. You get the Diakese fight was something that stuck out to me. Also, I was very impressed with Hooker's fight against Diakese, but Paul Felder. You watch his fight back with Mike Perry, and he fought that fight with a broken arm, or he broke his arm during the first round. He was cut badly multiple times. He was taken down. He would not go away. And he's able to land heavy strikes until the end. And in this fight, I think the longer the fight goes, this is going to play into Paul Felder's game. I think we're going to see... you look at his record, too. Paul Felder, 17-4 record. This guy wins. And the fight against Oliveira, too. He was put in the worst possible position you could be against Charles Oliveira, on the ground with the choke locked up. And he fought through it. I believe fought through an armbar. He, I believe, will come back to win this fight in the latter rounds. I'm going to say a 4th round TKO victory for Paul Felder in this spot. I also, you look at the odds and the way they're moving. I've seen Paul Felder up to plus 140 at one point. So wouldn't mind sprinkling a little Paul Felder in that spot. But Dan Hooker, I understand why folks are on him and the momentum that he has. He has the length, he has the quickness, he has the volume. Is it going to be too much for Paul Felder to overcome? That may be the case. So just proceed with caution in that bout. So we're going to pick Paul Felder to win the main event by stoppage late. Great fight we've got. Great card we've got. This is a bonanza when it comes to mixed martial arts and combat sports. We've got Tyson Fury taking on Deontay Wilder tonight. We've got Ryzen. We had Bellator last night. Incredible night of fights. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today. And you can follow me at MikesMMAPicks on Twitter. You can follow me at betmma.tips, at CapperTech. I want to thank BetDSI for hosting the podcast along with MMA Oddsbreaker. Also, in the future, you'll be able to, not for this card, but in the future, you'll be able to find a player or two here and there from me at the MMA Oddsbreaker Premium. But we'll keep our eye out for some opportunities ahead. And remember, folks, go get what's yours, my friends. This is your time. Your time.